Okay, today's lecture is going to be on the Four Horsemen of Oppression by Anarchy Arts, and as always, that's me. So let's go a quick overview over this. So the Four Horsemen of Oppression is a conceptual model of how paradigms are maintained. The Four Horsemen are faith, fear, fortune, and force. So again, this is just like I said, a visual aid or more of a conceptual aid to get you to visualize the relationship between oppressors and oppressed, and how they can interact with each other. So when creating or controlling a paradigm, you will employ these horsemen to get compliance for whatever rules you impose. So again, we'll look at this from the perspective of being the oppressor, the one in control. And when part of another paradigm, which horseman you serve determines your place within that given paradigm. So we'll also tackle it from the other angle of being one of the oppressed, just to get the full breakdown. So let's talk about faith first. Whenever a rule is imposed, a majority of people subject to it fall under the horsemen of faith. So just to clarify, when I use the word rule right here, this can be both overarching and individual. So for instance, a law against speeding is an individual rule, but a reign of a king would also qualify as kind of an overall rule. So both apply here. People who serve the horsemen of faith comply with the rules because they believe in them or the paradigm as a whole. So an example I'm going to use across all four horsemen, just for simplicity, is going to be shaving for work, right? So in this example, there's three categories you'd fall in if you shave for work. Maybe you're indifferent to it. You already like shaving, so it's no different to you. Or maybe a wife forces you not to shave, and now you get to shave for work. But even if you don't like shaving for work, you look at it as just a part of the duty, right? It's a small sacrifice in the greater picture. Good job, good pay, whatever. Or again, jury duty. Yeah, you're going to lose money doing jury duty for $15 a day instead of making between $150 to $300, $400 a day. But you support the paradigm as a whole. You like the legal system. You like the idea of it. So you will make this sacrifice with pride, not necessarily happiness, but with pride, because you have faith in the overall rule. So that's the example there. Now let's get into the second horseman of fear. So the second largest group of people that comply with the paradigm serve the horsemen of fear. So I think I forgot to do this in the last slide, but let me break it down, right? Let's just do it for simplicity, right? You have a rule, you're in power. There's people who will comply, and then there's people who will not comply, right? There's people who follow the rules and people who don't follow the rules. So a majority of people who follow the rules fall under faith, right? They either follow the rules because they believe in those particular rules, or they believe in the rule of a whole is better for them or their children or their future. Okay, the second group is going to be people who fall under fear. These people don't believe, support the rules and or the paradigm, but comply solely to avoid the consequences of disobedience. So using our overarching example of shaving for a job, this is a very simple example, is you hate shaving, you don't want to do it, but you don't want to lose the job more, right? You really, really don't want to do this, but you need the money, right? You don't want to pay your taxes, you hate the system, but you're not willing to go to war with whoever's collecting the taxes and whatever government you have, right? So you really don't want to do this, you really don't want to go to jury duty, but you don't want to get arrested for dereliction of duty either, right? So again, pretty simple here. Even though you don't want to comply, right? With faith, you're willing to comply, even if it's a little bit of I don't really want to, but hey, in the greater good, I'm happy to do it. Versus fear is you really, really, really don't want to do it with every fabric of your soul, but you bend over and do it anyways because you're afraid of the consequences of not doing it. So now we're going to get into fortune, and this is going to be the first category of people who do not comply with the rules. Of the minority of people who do not serve faith or fear, a majority of them fall into the category of serving fortune. These people are willing to break the rules imposed on them, but instead of attempting to have freedom from the paradigm, they merely work for privilege within it. So going back to our overarching example, right? You don't believe you should have to shave for a job. So you're willing to fight against it, and your employee, right? They want to stay in power. They want the majority of the people in your job to shave. So knowing that you're unruly and you're not afraid of them, and you don't buy into the whole it's part of the job or it's better for the greater good thing, they offer you with an exception, right? They say, okay, we'll allow you not to shave, but you can't tell anybody about it, sign this NDA, whatever. But they'll afford you privilege so that they don't have to fight you, which I'll get into later, right? Best example I can give of this in a larger macro would be cartels or gangs, right? A lot of these organizations break the law on a regular basis. Let's talk about the cartels in Mexico for now, right? They sell a bunch of drugs, they have a bunch of money. Now, if they wanted to change the paradigm or be independent of the banking system, because if we look at the whole global banking system as a whole, is their activity really threatening that, right? You look at the wealthiest countries and people in the world, is their behavior taking anything off their plate? Not really. It doesn't affect the whole world banking system. So they're allowed to continue to, murder people, kidnap people, sell drugs, whatever. As long as they're not disrupting, let's say, the dollar, their activities are not a big deal for the larger people at the top. And sometimes they'll work with them, right? And so but if they wanted to disrupt the global financial system, they could create their own currency, probably backed by a special or precious metal, and force people who want to buy drugs from them to buy that currency, then buy drugs in that currency, thus propping it up. And now they would have their own banking system that would be independent from the world banking system. Then they would actually put themselves in position to not be oppressed because they wouldn't have to borrow from these larger banks or operate within their currency. But instead of doing that, they are content to, again, break the rules on a level that does not threaten the overall paradigm. And in return, they get a larger slice of the pie, right? They're super wealthy. So if they wanted to truly resist the system, they would create their own currency, but instead they just have a much, much, much larger concentration of the same currency everybody is subject to, and thus they are not overthrowing the system, they're just elevating their rank within it. And that is fortune, is people who are, if you're the oppressor, people who are willing to fight you and are willing to break the rules, but a majority of those people will continue to serve you if you give them special privilege. If you give them exceptions, let them operate above some laws, give them higher status over some people, but overall, they're not going to throw you off the seat of power. They just want a small piece of your power. And finally, we get to the last horseman of oppression, which is force. The last category of people within a paradigm, as well as those that control it, both serve the last horseman of force, or death. And I'll get into that in a second. These people can't be convinced, intimidated, or bought into complying with the paradigm, and the rulers of the current paradigm must fight with them until one party reigns supreme. So, as I said, right, you can't be, let's go back to the shaving, right, is again, you don't buy into it as part of the duty, you're not afraid to lose your job over it, and you're offered a special exception, but you want to take it all the way and say, you know what, no, I don't want a special exception. I don't want a piece of the pie. I want to erase this shaving policy altogether, right? And then within that realm, we would have to fight in court, right? But you go to court over that, there can only be one winner, right? Either, judge is going to rule in their favor and you either have to quit or shave, or they're going to rule in the other, your favor and the other person's. But at the end of the day, that paradigm is in the balance and both parties are dedicated to fighting over it, right? Because again, going back to the oppressor class, if they're not willing to take it that far, again, right, they'll give you the exception or they'll just, fuck it, we'll just get rid of the policy on our own. We don't want to go to court, right? But in order to truly rule a paradigm, you do have to be able to be willing to take things all the way. You can't rule any paradigm purely off of diplomacy and talking and ideas. At the end of the day, if somebody's willing to fight with you to the death, to defy your paradigm or to destroy it, you have to be willing to stand in there with them and put them down. Both of you are willing to stand up to each other. Nobody's willing to sit down, so one of you has to be put down. So let's go over the takeaways of what we just learned today. So those unwilling to serve force cannot be in control of the paradigm nor truly resist the rule of any paradigm. So as I just explained, if you're an oppressor, but you're not willing to use force, you're not willing to forcibly remove your opposition, then you're not truly in power, because when somebody who is willing to go that far steps on the scene, you're going to end up answering to them, or you're no longer going to exist. And vice versa, if you're one of the oppressed and you're only willing to take it so far, but I'm not willing to use violence, I'm not willing to forcibly destroy my oppressors, then you will always be oppressed. No matter what you believe, no matter what your circle of friends have convinced you to believe, no matter what you read online, no matter what nonsense meditation or positivity bullshit you believe in, if you're not willing to use force, you will always be on the oppressed end of the spectrum. Which brings me to the next point. You either play the role of oppressor or oppressed. There is no in between. And a perfect example of that is voting. Okay, so in voting, when you vote, there are three possibilities, three categories you fall into, right? You either vote for the winning party, you vote for the losing party, or you don't vote at all. If you vote for the winning party, let's use American politics, for example. Let's say I'm a super liberal and I don't want people to be able to carry guns that they legally own without a permit. If I vote for that and that wins, I have a hand in the, I'm the oppressor now, right? I am taking away liberties from other people, right? Those people that could do that thing that I voted to stop them from doing, they can no longer do that thing, right? Again, we talk about force, right? The government will use up to violence to force them to stop doing that. Okay, but since in democracy, right, we all have an equal vote, I am equally responsible for that oppression just as responsible as the police who enforce it or the lawmakers who write it, right? I am the oppressing class in that one. I am imposing my will on other people, oftentimes, right, we talk about fear, fortune, all these things, against their will, okay? Or again, if I'm, a hardcore Republican and I want to outlaw abortion, right? And what I want passes, I'm the oppressor. I am taking away liberties from another group of people. And of course, we go vice versa, right? If I'm the loser in those situations, I'm being oppressed. My liberties are being taken away from me, again, with up to, force, right? And of course, if I don't vote at all, then I'm just a pure oppressor because I'm just subject to other people's will. I have no will of my own. It's just whatever other people tell me to do, I'm going to end up doing it, right? So again, with voting, there is no in between. There's no middle ground of, well, I didn't vote for that, so I'm, well, if you didn't vote for it, you're part of the oppressed. You're getting dragged along with it just as much as the opposition, right? So in order to have control of your life, you have to be willing to be the oppressor. If you're not willing to go that far, then you will always be the oppressed. Again, going back to fortune, you may have a higher status within the oppressive system than some other people, but make no mistake, you still answer to the same master. And that is the end of the lecture.